Hello. So far in this podcast, we've talked about how one of the changes we can make for the environment and the planet is to eat more plants, which is all very well. But if you're actually doing this cooking for kids, for example, and you don't want loads of extra stress or extra food waste, that can be quite challenging. And it's not just about parents, as we want the next generation also to be eating well for the planet, for the good of everybody. So I'm really delighted today to welcome Kim Smith. And Kim has more than 20 years of experience in the food industry and is currently a PhD researcher at City University of London and also a very hands-on trustee at TasteEd, which is a charity that uses a sensory approach to introduce children to new foods. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you, Sarah. Lovely to see you.
Thank you. And Kim, your work focuses on trying to get children to eat more fruit and veg. So what do we know about how much kids in the UK are actually eating of fruit and veg at the moment?
Well, as probably many parents can confirm, children don't eat a huge amount of fruit and vegetables, particularly vegetables. And there's a report by the Food Foundation called Veg Facts where they kind of examine this on a regular basis. And sadly, it reported that around a third of children between the ages of 5 and 10 eat less than one portion of fruit and veg a day. And actually, the vegetable content of that does also include baked beans and pizza. So actually, the range of vegetables in particular that are being eaten is very narrow as well. It includes kind of carrots, tomatoes, peppers and cucumber, I think. So it's not very much and it's not a very wide variety. And actually, the other really scary thing is actually a fifth of those vegetables are actually ultra-processed foods. So they're very heavily processed kind of pre-made foods that actually aren't very good for you either. So it's pretty dire. And since COVID, it's got worse. So children are eating even less now than they were when their Veg Facts report actually started. So it's not good.
What are the barriers, would you say, to eating more veg? Why are those figures so low?
I think there are many factors, really. With regards to children and vegetable consumption in particular, first of all, I think we must acknowledge that young children specifically, they're predisposed to like sweet foods. That's kind of an evolutionary kind of mechanism that we have. We're predisposed to seek those sweet, nutritious foods out. And, you know, historically, bitter foods like green leafy vegetables could have been poisonous. So there's a kind of a safety mechanism there, which is why quite often when you are weaning, that's the kind of the intense period when that presents itself, because if children were walking off on their own, kind of more unsupervised, that's the kind of safety mechanism that was in place. So already, without anything else considered, there is a challenge there to get them to kind of learn to like those vegetables. And I think it's the learning to like that we need to kind of understand, because it's not a natural ability that we have. We're not just born with eating a wide range we have to learn to like these things because we tend to eat what we like and what we enjoy. So that weaning process, but also the whole of childhood, and actually I would even say the whole of life, is a journey in developing our taste preferences. I think there's a lot that's kind of that changes throughout life, and our food tastes do develop. But I think with regards to vegetables in particular, we don't really, particularly in this country, we don't really have a culture of enjoying vegetables. We don't go, yay, carrots, particularly in the UK where we've got a kind of meat and two veg culture that's, you know, still quite present. You know, you go out to eat, the vegetables are definitely on the side. So culturally, we just don't have a way of celebrating those vegetables. We don't have a long history of cooking those vegetables well, like the French or the Italians maybe. Inherently, we're kind of just not confident, I think, about vegetables in this country. It is changing. There are some such brilliant kind of food writers and chefs who are kind of really pushing that. But I think, particularly when you talk to parents, it's kind of, if you're going to get kind of food thrown back at you or criticism about what you've offered, and you don't have the confidence to just kind of keep trying, then it is going to be really, really hard. And also if they don't like it to begin with and they don't want to learn to like it. So there's a lot of factors that really do make it difficult.
That's quite a stressful situation, isn't it? Where you've put the time in, you think, I'm doing a good job here. You put it in front of them, they don't want to eat it. But I guess there's also other factors, like I'm just saying about the time, you know, I mean, so what do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Time and the skills really as well, like the knife skills, you know, because actually vegetables, you tend to get them whole. You can get them pre-prepared and stuff, but there's a lot of preparation required. So, you know, and obviously particularly in families, but also for most people, the amount of time given to food preparation is shrinking. The amount of skills and knowledge people have is decreasing. It's also not being transferred through families either. So children don't kind of get exposure to those kind of things. They don't have a go very early on, which is why I think a lot of it comes to the default is for it to come to schools, because the children are definitely at school, but they might not get those opportunities at home.
Brilliant. Okay, so lots of barriers, but I guess some people might say that fussy kids are nothing new. Why does it matter? Aren't they just going to grow out of it?
Yeah, I mean, many people grow out of it. I've met so many people who are like, oh, I was like the fussiest child, and now I'm really into artichokes and things. It does. I mean, I think that's the one thing I always say to any parent or any person that's struggling with kind of food is that it's really normal. It's really normal, and it's not permanent. It's not like this child will never eat broccoli or they're going to, like I was saying to Nadine, they're not going to get rickets overnight. It's not kind of, it does take a really long time. And it's not, like you say, it isn't nothing new. However, I think the food environment we're living in today makes it very easy not to eat the vegetables. I think the proliferation of things like children's food, the kind of pouches and pre-prepared foods and kind of the ease of those things make it very easy not to eat the vegetables. So we don't eat enough, and then I think the availability of everything else and the lack of vegetables in those other options just make it even harder.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I suppose then you've got the challenge that if you're cooking food for your family, then you might be cooking different things for the kids and the adults. Is that so we just live with that and go with it, or any thoughts on that? Help.
I think every family's so different. They're their own little ecosystem. It's kind of doing what works for families, and it depends so much of what we eat and how we eat is affected by everything else that's going on as well. I think to take kind of all of that in isolation, you have to, it depends how the day's going, what the money situation is like what they've had to eat at school, how tired you are, is kind of what availability of equipment you might have, the pressures on your finances and things. There's so many different factors that kind of challenge it. So it's very definite. Yeah, it has to be depending on what's going on at home.
Yeah, no, that's good to bear in mind, definitely. Okay, so should we zoom out a bit then? Thinking about, we talked a bit about what it's like to be a parent almost in that situation now, but as a society, then there's a bigger question about how do we get the next generation, of this country or globally to eat more plants. So, how important is it that we get kids early on eating more plants, or how hard is it to change those tastes later on?
Well, I mean, it's definitely, I think, like I was just saying, it's a lifelong kind of journey, and it starts kind of in utero, like when women are pregnant. That can help shape food preferences, like what the mother eats, which I've seen with my own kids. I ate loads of avocado when I was pregnant with my youngest, and we call him my avocado baby because it's like his most favourite thing. But I think the evidence definitely does show that the earlier, particularly during the weaning, but also the young childhood, is a really important time for setting those dietary preferences. However, it's not, if your kid gets to the age of 10 and still doesn't really like eating vegetables, which is really normal, then actually they're not a lost cause either. They may get a girlfriend that is a vegetarian, and they will suddenly decide, I think I might need to learn to love vegetables. It's kind of like we are very, that neuroplasticity is very, very real in food preferences and choices as well, definitely.
At Tasted, you use a sensory approach to introduce kids to new foods, and you've got 2 golden rules, which I really love. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So the golden rules at Tasted are you don't have to try it and you don't have to like it, which the first one, don't have to try it, people find quite counterintuitive.
I think we've been doing it wrong. Basically, we've ruined our kids because it's always like, you've got to try it.
That is what the evidence says, is kind of 10 and 13 goes of trying something helps you to kind of develop a preference for it, or kind of be comfortable eating it. But the thinking behind you don't have to try it is about removing pressure. Because the moment, I mean, if I was to say to you, Sarah, you must eat that avocado, and you hate avocado, you're going to be like... That
would really go badly. Yeah, I would just never eat it ever, probably, if you did that. Yeah.
So it's kind of actually it's designed to just take the pressure off. And we do see children visibly relax. I mean, I've had children in class. I did a session with cauliflower, which was quite controversial because I took boiled, roasted and raw kind of cauliflower to try, and I had children literally sitting on their hands being like, not on your Nelly. I'm not gonna eat that. But by really, truly saying to them, you don't have to eat it, because actually the joy of tasted is that you can use all your other senses. So simply looking at something is helping to build that familiarization with a vegetable, because for some children, just being near it is being brave enough. Like, that is a big enough leap for them, is to even have it near their plate or kind of in their vicinity. That's enough for them. So the fact that you can look at it, you can smell it, you can touch it, and you can kind of become familiar, so that then it's not so scary. Because, you know, I think all of us have had experiences. I certainly have, when I've been on holiday in a foreign country and I've been presented with something, I don't know what it is, and I'm like, you can feel the fear rise. I think it's just a very natural reaction to not knowing what something is. So what Tasted does, it helps to increase the opportunities for exposure to fruits and vegetables and new foods that children may not have come across before, because we do find that children have never seen a whole onion before. So that becomes kind of quite scary if you're kind of presented with those things and you don't know what it is. It's all about breaking down the barriers. So we can look at it, we can lick it, we encourage children, because that's still tasting. It removes that pressure as well, not being at dinner time when children are hungry and parents have cooked and made an effort. So it's a very removed experience that is very, it's just fun. It's really fun and a bit silly.
So I can see my producer is waving some mint at me at the moment.
So I'm going to give you a taste of Tasted, Sarah. It's really simple, and this really does show the simplicity of using the senses. So this is some fresh mint, and all I want you to do is to kind of rub it with your fingers so it releases the aroma, and have a really good smell, have a good sniff, and a good feel. And I'm just going to explain what it makes me think of. For me, fresh mint always takes me back to a holiday I had when I was in my 20s in Morocco, and they were making all the mint tea, and the smell of the mint when the hot water was poured from a height onto the kind of big bundle of fresh mint was just amazing, and that really takes me back to that kind of place. So I'm going to ask you, what does it make you think of? And it can be anything. There's no wrong answer or right answer.
Yeah, it definitely takes me to sort of a happy place. And I did go through a phase of growing quite a lot of it, like in pots and everything. And also I was trying to get it to grow in the paving stones on the patio outside my greenhouse. So that's kind of like one of my happy places. So sometimes I would just as I walk past it, I'd like break bits off and eat it. And I'm actually restraining myself from breaking a bit off and eating it now, because I don't want to then be spitting it down the microphone. And also, I guess during lockdown, we had a lot of, we had a 3-day meal rotation, which was quite dire in the worst of the moment, the times. And on that meal rotation, we had lentil salad, and had loads and loads of mint in that. So it sort of takes me back in a good and bad way, actually. I realise I'm rambling on. Maybe that's the point.
Well, it's universal, isn't it? It's an experience that anybody can talk about. It's levelling. And also what's beautiful about when you do something with, particularly around smell, interestingly, you end up getting really great kind of cultural references. So some children might say, the cinnamon smells like the chai latte that my nan has in Costa, and then another child will be like, oh, that's curry, that's what we have all the time, or another will be like, it's apple crumble, and it's very English kind of. So suddenly they're all different, and you get these wonderful stories, and it really helps to kind of people to communicate and connect over food, which is just and it really just helps the children kind of come together and actually make them feel very relaxed as well.
I'm trying to picture how that works though with mint, because I guess I'm quite lucky that I'm able to grow mint in tubs, and I guess I'm getting on a bit now, so I've had experiences with mint. But how does that go with children who may not have even smelt fresh mint before?
They might say it smells like toothpaste, and actually all of it's relevant, and it's about kind of acknowledging their experience.
Okay, amazing. So I guess to get it. Is there research that shows this actually helps?
Yeah, so sensory food education, which is the approach we use, is relatively new as an approach, but there is growing evidence that shows how using these kind of sensory approaches increases children's willingness to try new foods. So breaking down those barriers and engaging the senses in a gentle and kind of fun way just increases that kind of their courage to try something new, particularly kind of fruits and vegetables and berries, because a lot of this work has been done in the Nordic regions, but just also new foods in general. And also there is evidence to show that it increases familiarisation and obviously opportunities to be exposed to kind of different foods and fruits and vegetables, which will then increase the likelihood of people trying them as well. And if people try them, they can learn to like them and then hopefully eat them for kind of forever. And then the other piece of evidence, which I'm really interested in, is how in schools, when they do food education, so it might be about learning about healthy eating or climate change or anything like that, with regards to food, the interventions, so the activities that work best in terms of having the biggest impact on children's diet and kind of the foods they consume, are what's called multi-component ones that include hands-on activities. And that's what Taste Ed is. It's by engaging, it's not learning the Eat Well plate, which most children will know and recognise what a healthy diet looks like. It actually gives them a chance to handle things and actually develop the behaviour to actually eat the foods. So not the knowledge that to know about the foods, but the behaviours to eat the foods. And that's what the research is starting to show as well, which is really exciting.
Okay, so loads of great ideas here popping into my head, but I guess there's a risk that we're just sort of overloading parents, like you mentioned already about, you know, all the other pressures that parents are under. And I guess chatting to my producer earlier on about, you know, the stress of getting back and cooking food, but also having to deal with, you know, kids got nits and got to source knit shampoo from somewhere while washing the PE kit and so on. So, you know, how much can schools and nurseries and places outside the home support parents in doing this?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that we can do in schools and nurseries. And I think there's actually already a lot happening. I think it's just possibly below the radar. You know, for example, food is on the curriculum in England and in Scotland and Wales as well, and Northern Ireland as well, in kind of different forms. And naturally, food is so interdisciplinary, it can connect to so much. And so something like Taste Ed, for example, can be used to teach history. We've got lessons on the Great Fire of London, so learning through food. But the same in science, there's lots of food topics on the curriculum in science in primary school, so learning how to grow beans and things. And actually, teachers already do a lot of this at the moment. You were talking earlier about enabling the populations to be able to be equipped to kind of eat sustainably and live sustainable lives. And the best place to do that is in school. And I think we've got new curriculum for climate change as well, which will also garner, I think, some attention around how food can help to address climate change as well. So there's just a huge amount that can be done and is already happening as well.
No, that'd be fantastic to connect those things together, wouldn't it? Yeah. And I guess, you'll be very familiar with Henry Dimbleby National Food Strategy. And, you know, people who want to know more about that, there's an amazing book called Ravenous by Henry Dimbleby. So this actually called for sensory food education to be taught in nursery and reception, so that must have been music to your ears. It
was such a game changer for us. Yeah, it was really good to have that in there, because what it meant was that the government, so the Department for Education, read obviously the recommendations and then went and Googled what is sensory food education, because they knew nothing about it. They came across Taste Ed, which was very fortunate. And I've spent some time working with them really closely to actually develop guidance for nurseries and childminders about how to use sensory food education in their settings. Because particularly for nurseries and childminders, that kind of up to 4-year-olds, this sensory approach is really like it speaks their language. They do a lot of those kind of activities already. They're very kind of experiential and hands-on, and it really fits with their approach in early years. So yeah, we've got hundreds of nurseries using Taste Ed, which is actually really vital as well, because that's getting in even earlier than working with them in schools, you know, really from that weaning stage, really helping them to kind of develop that taste preference for vegetables. And
I guess I'm really interested in the power that kids have. I mean, I know kids are not usually necessarily making direct decisions about purchasing a food, but how much do you think kids can influence the food that's bought?
Oh, completely. My kids certainly do. I've been stopped so many times by parents going, what do you do? I now have to buy Rocket. And like, if I had offered them Rocket, I would have just, I would have had tantrums. But they've come home and they're very proudly saying, I tried Rocket today and I liked it. Can we have it for dinner? And also similarly, my one of the reception teachers, her husband grows mushrooms. So she did a whole session around mushroom pate, which I was like, what? Are you mad? It was just like such an unusual food to offer 5-year-olds. I thought she was a bit nuts, frankly. But they really got into it because they made it. So I think there is very definitely a two-way opportunity for kind of taking new kind of foods home, and I think that's the opportunity of being in school, particularly with around school meals as well, like actually helping children to kind of broaden their diets in a place where their peers are doing things new as well. School is a place where children are very used to learning and trying out new activities or whatever, so it's a very safe place to try that. And I think there's lots of opportunity for that to feed home as well, particularly if you connect the schools with families in the way that they do brilliantly.
Okay, so I guess before we finish up, I just want to see, you mentioned a few tips, I guess, within that. We want to change the whole of society and the food environment, but just going back to like if somebody's a parent wanting to do more on this, have you got any ways you can make it easier? For example, how to make it cheaper or, more practical, as well as going out and buying, this massive stem of broccoli and then wondering what to do with the woody stalk.
Absolutely. Oh, there's loads. The first thing to say is definitely it depends on your children and your circumstances as to kind of where you are in that journey. But I think what's really important is to just go slowly, not try and kind of throw lots of new things at children. And also for you to build your confidence around things as well, because these things might be new to you as well. But I think really practically, one of the things that actually doing when I joined Tasted that's had a huge impact on my own home life is talking about food. So I've always worked in food. I love food. I'm a bit obsessed. What Tasted has taught me is that it's really important to give children a space to talk about what they don't like eating, because it's kind of frowned upon. And I think we don't give children the space, and that's actually what Tasted does. We have great discussions about what they really don't like, but the key thing is understanding why. For example, like one of the first lessons I was doing in reception was a tomato lesson, which I thought was going to be really, really straightforward, a bit of a hit. And it was such a disaster. 2/3 of the children hate tomatoes with a passion. So we ended up having this massive conversation about why I don't like the seeds, I don't like the thick skin and the watery inside, or I don't like the sourness, or some people like, when they're not very ripe, but they're a bit crunchy, which is just a bit wrong. And one child really hated the surprise of the pop of a whole cherry tomato in his mouth, just could not handle it. What people come away with is understanding about themselves. My son would never have carrot sticks in his packed lunch. And I'd be like, you eat carrots at home. Why don't you eat them when you're at school? And he's like, but mummy, when we have carrots at home, they're cooked. You can put cooked carrots in my packed lunch because I've got wobbly teeth at the moment. When you crack open the issue and ask why, normally there will be a very strong preference for something. Normally it's down to texture. So like with the tomatoes, there's a lot of textural references about why they don't like something. Some children really like crunchy food. So they might like peppers and raw carrot sticks and celery, and they might not like cooked foods. Some children like foods all together, mixed in. Some children like their foods very separate and not to touch. So once as someone that's feeding a child, you can start to understand that. Then you can go, okay, so you really like cooked carrots. What about grated carrots? Because that's completely different. My son's now 10. We still have these conversations, and he was like, why do they give the snacks at school? They give us carrots and they're not peeled. They really don't taste very nice. And then we started a conversation about how the shape it is cut, actually, he thinks it affects how it tastes when you eat it. They're not just being awkward. Sometimes it's a power play, definitely. Majority of the time, it's just a really strong personal preference. And actually, even as adults, we have that when I do assemblies with parents. They think they're kind of fully formed people with very broad taste preferences. And then they came up to me afterwards, and one lady was like, I realised I hate butternut squash. I hate sweet potato. Actually, then she started to understand why. It's because they're just sweet and mushy, and she didn't like that. She likes quite crunchy foods and really likes the salad and things. So then what you can do is, I always talk about finding adjacency. So for example, if a kid really loves cucumber sticks, then you could try raw cauliflower, or you could try, chopped up pepper, or find some other things which might be similar that you can offer at the same time as the thing that they like. And it's like, well, it's crunchy like a carrot, so there's adjacency there. But I think the talking is it's quite shameful to admit what you don't like.
And loads to think about. And I've still got the whole room smelling of mint because I've been fiddling with it as we've been talking. I'm really looking forward to eating it, actually. But before we go, I'm asking all my guests, what are you having for dinner tonight? So I don't know if you'd be happy to share that with everybody.
Yeah, of course. So we're having pasta, a real crowd pleaser. For us, it's brown rice pasta because I'm celiac. And we are having a sauce that I made yesterday with basically everything from the fridge, a sausage pasta bake kind of thing that I'm going to chuck into the oven when we get back from clubs. Well, I hope you have a really fantastic dinner. That sounds really nice. And thank you so much, Kim, for coming onto the podcast. Thank you, Sarah.